All right, today for Texas Coaches to Coaches, we have Jeff Passwater, who has coached at McKendree College. Where is that? The University of Pacific, is the current assistant coach at Austin College, and also works with the North Texas Underwater Polo Club. Jeff today's going to talk about set plays and timeouts and kind of different situations that coaches kind of need to address here or there as their kind of teams kind of progress from the younger ages to the older ages. Jeff, it's all yours, and kind of how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Been on several of these, and these have been really informative so far. So I'm really glad I could be a part of it.
Well, thank you so much. And the stage is yours. So
all right, sounds good. So my name's Jeff Passwater. I'm pretty new to Texas. I got here in October, so I guess maybe not that new anymore. But I was coaching in college for the last 5 years. My first job was volunteering for Coach Mercado at Brown University, and kind of moved on to some other places since then and learned a lot about set plays. I grew up in St. Louis, where I learned a really fundamental style of water polo and not, oh yeah, another St. Louis.
Born and raised St. Louis. Attaboy, Jeff.
Nice. Where'd you go to high school?
Ladue. You asked the St. Louis question even. You're legit.
So you know Big A and all those guys? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So so I learned a really fundamental style of water polo, and I was convinced to run plays. Well, obviously, Felix had some plays that he ran, and it was when I got to University of Pacific, my kind of understanding of statistics and analytics and tactical water polo was like a very steep learning curve there. So basically, I'm going to try and convince hopefully some of you to run set plays. At least when talking with Joe about this topic, there was at least a chance that I might have to convince some of you that a set play would be a good idea. So we'll start off with defining them. We'll move on to why I teach them and how to start, and then basically what to look for with your team, what you think, and get your feedback on what you think, what skill set your players need to have in order to run plays. So we'll get started. While I'm doing this, it's kind of interesting when you line up for one of my, when you line up for an after goal, when, I lost my cursor here. This happens on my computer. I lose my cursor, so I can't minimize things. But anyway, when you line up for an after goal, you're playing 6-on-6 water polo. So an after goal, just when you're lined up at half, for those that are new, when you're lined up at half after the other team has scored a goal, you have basically a 15 to 17% chance of scoring a goal in that 6-on-6 opportunity. And those are stats I learned when I was at UOP. And why is that important? Well, if we can run a play that puts our center in a good position, that can maybe draw a kick out, or at least get the center closer to goal or draw the attention of the referee, we can increase that to almost 40%. So if we can get a kick out, we go from 15 to 17% to almost 40% chance of scoring a goal. So does everybody kind of follow that logic? Okay, cool. So that's one reason why I think set plays are important. We're going to talk about when to use them, how to practice them. I would love discussion. So stop me if something doesn't make sense, or if you're just disagreeing with my thought process. So we'll look at some plays on film, get some ideas, hopefully, and then hopefully if you don't like set plays now, maybe we can at least convince you to leave here with an open mind. So what is a set play? I guess I want to differentiate between having an offensive game plan. Okay, your center struggling to get position, so swim center out and drive in somebody else. That might be an offensive game plan. Whereas a play, for me, is a moment in offense where there's a beginning, followed by a moment where there's a ball handler that has an opportunity to make a read to create some kind of opportunity that increases our chances of something positive. Okay, so that seems really vague, but I don't want to limit, I guess, what a play is. So coaches will use plays to create opportunities that aren't typically created running a typical offense. We're finding better opportunities by designing a play. And that can be based on strengths of your team, strengths of the defense, or weaknesses in both. So I also think it's important to note that I do not think plays are overcoaching or joysticking the players. I think it's just giving the team the best chance to create. They're fun to teach, and you can allow your players to affect the possession a little bit more. So we're going to look at a play here. This is from Hartwick. So if you know Hartwick, when they were a program, Alan Huckins was a really creative coach. I spent hours searching for a particular play that I couldn't quite find. But this is just a play where this doesn't look normal, right? Where everybody's bunched up in the middle. So there's something going on. And you can see they're probably going to pass the ball back to the goalie. And it's already affected the defense because the defense is way off of them. They're already in the back.
Who is Hartwick playing?
UOP. So
Okay.
I did video for UOP. So this is what a lot of my video stuff is from. So right here is kind of a critical moment. They kind of have three centers. Now, obviously, the staff at UOP did some of their homework maybe, and they're kind of set up in this defense where it kind of looks like the tail end of a counter defense. So they're just trying to create some space, move, trying to get a defender on their back. It's just kind of an interesting play. So this doesn't necessarily result in something, but the idea is if they just lined up 6 players and lined up against UOP's 6 players, they might not have gotten the ball this deep. And for some coaches, that can be reason enough to call a play or to run a play, just to get playing deeper. Right now, the ball is just outside of 5 meters, maybe 5.5, 6 meters. So maybe that pass would have been made if they had just lined up when they were at 7 meters. So I think that's can be a reason to run a play, is to just get closer to the goal. Okay.
Hey, do you think a legit reason to run a set play is also to induce the defense to make a mistake? You know, allow them to make an error and capitalize?
Yeah, I 100% agree. We're just trying to get higher than 15 to 17%. And we're going to talk about that here. So basically, this is why I love to teach them. We just looked at one. We just talked about one of the reasons why, just to get everybody closer to the goal, could be enough of a reason to call one or to work on it in practice. So it's also kind of narrowing the responsibility of each player. So if you think about your 6 players and you're coaching high school, or say you're coaching even JV, every time the ball moves one spot, you are asking 6 of your players, your 6 players that are in the water, to make a read. And that's 6 opportunities for a player to either make a mistake reading, not see something. And so there, you can just see the multiplying of possibilities of mistakes. If you tell player at 4 to drive down to 5, when the ball gets to 2, right? If you can follow that, then basically we are just simplifying the job, the responsibility of that player. So I think plays significantly lessen the opportunity for mistakes, and I think it also increases the opportunity to pressure the defense into their own mental errors. I've spent a lot of time on these Jack Coker calls, as I'm sure a lot of you have, and what's his phrase? attack the mind to steal the time. So I think you're attacking the defense in a way that they're not used to, and that can create some good opportunities. Also, I think everyone will eventually use plays as a coach. If you're coaching 12 and unders, and this was, if you're coaching 12 and unders, the best 12 and under team in the country probably has some kind of play.
Now, yesterday, whenever you and I were talking, you were mentioning again, like, about the 15, 17% off the line. But then if you get an exclusion off of just a set play off the line, then it goes up to what, about 40, 45%?
It's just under 40, and those, it's just under 40.
So can you explain that more for everybody?
Yeah. So if you can get a kick out and play 6-on-5, 6-on-5s score 35 to 40%. I mean, it kind of depends on the level, and that particular statistic is based on like pretty high level college water polo. And but I kind of think, and this is just me, because I haven't sat and coached and stat enough high school games or club games to come up with like a measurable stat. But I would tend to think that if the ball handling is a little bit worse in high school than it is at high level college, the goalies are a little bit worse, the centers are a little bit worse, then it probably all basically balances out. But the thought being, if we can get to a 6-on-5, we've got a much higher percentage chance of scoring than playing 6-on-6. And I also think people tend to be shocked when they find out just how few offensive possessions end in a goal when it's 6-on-6. And that 15 to 17% is just going down, playing set offense in the umbrella, trying to score a goal. So the vast majority of those do not work out well for the offense. And also you brought up yesterday too, Joe, that if you think 12 and unders can't handle a play, the like Little League World Series, those are 12 and under players. Those players are using signs, and they're stealing signs, and they've got 2 base coaches that are all throwing up fake signs and doing all sorts of things. And so.
Hey, Jeff, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I coach anywhere from 12 on up to 20.
Yeah.
And it's almost, a paradox that the younger kids actually benefit from specific instruction. Like you said, 1 or 2 instructions, you do, then you do that, and it gets them in the right frame of mind, because, high level problem solving in water polo is not an easy thing to do. Like you said, you got to read, you've got 12 players in the water, you got to figure it out. The older kids can solve that puzzle, on their own, but the younger kids, it's actually beneficial to run a scripted play like this, but, really short, do 1 thing or 2, and that's it.
Yeah. And you can keep it simple. And a play for me can just be, hey, after the ball goes here, you're going to drive. And it's just something simple. It also teaches them that, hey, give up the ball and drive, or this is how you win a drive, or this is what happens after you're done driving. It can teach all these little things that might require a drill.
Yeah. And I'll add to that, just because I have my son is actively, who's 9, who's actively involved in football and in basketball for his age group. They're running plays. I mean, and especially their football team, their coach is like, well, he thinks he's in the NFL, but they're running plays, and they went undefeated last year. But they're talking sweep 5. I'm like watching these 9-year-olds just take instructions, and I agree with both Rob and Jeff. Like, I don't know why we feel like we have to be different. Like it won't work for us, but I think that it might be an opportunity for us to reevaluate how we're teaching these younger athletes, as we're teaching them the fundamentals, but also like allow them to see how much information they can absorb and apply. Yeah.
I tend to see more light bulbs go off above their head when teaching a play, or just teaching just that part of it, and that they can apply to other parts of the game. So, okay. So we're gonna basically move into the game situations where I would run plays. And I suggest highly kind of starting with after goals. And the one reason is you're at half pool with a full shot clock, and you know where everybody's lined up. You can pass the ball back to your primary ball handler or pass the ball back to your goalie, but it's also a chance to answer every single goal with something positive. So I was in Trinidad last summer. One incident was I had a 15 and under girls team that was playing in the 17 and under Pan Ams, and we were going to have to play the US, Canada, Brazil. And I knew, especially in the early rounds, that they were going to drop 30 goals on us. So how do I keep my kids? This was more of like, how do I keep them involved in the game? How do I keep them from, how do I get them to keep it together? And just say, hey, you've got to move on. We just gave up a goal. We have to forget about it and move on. Let's go answer it and try and get a kick out with some kind of play. And so I had 2 after goal plays. And that was basically my selling point to the team of how do we move on? How do we move on from these bad moments that we made, which is also a pretty important lesson to teach players. Okay, so let's take a look at this play.
And another aspect is the defense is all happy that they just scored.
Yes.
And they're not really kind of focused on defense a lot of times. So that's also true. So this is a play where the primary ball handler, they pass the ball back to the goalie. And if we back this up more, we could see that this is an after goal play. But basically, if you started the play here, this could be kind of like a post timeout play as well. So 1 is going to clear out and 3 is going to drive. And then 3 is going to have a pretty interesting decision to make. Okay. So I had this kind of clipped out for. Okay, so 4, the primary ball handler was fouled, and that's going to be important later on in our kind of skill set discussion. But so how many of your players would be shooting this ball right now? all high school boys.
Quite a few of them, yeah.
Okay. So we have this 6-on-6 scenario where even this looks like it could be a pretty good shot, even though his offhand is out of the water. The goalie's certainly hip to what's going on here, right? And he's got to make a big turn, and he's got a guy getting ready to attack his arm. But let's look at what happens. Plays it into center, and the guy just gets absolutely destroyed, but it's a penalty. So looking at this play from the beginning, it's important to note that this is a left-handed center. Okay. When this gets cleared out, we're taking a defender all the way over to the other side. And notice when he starts his drive, when 3 starts their drive, it's right when this defender is committed to going. Okay. That defender's committed to going. He's winning this drive. This player is vertical. He's obviously horizontal because he's swimming. And I just know who this kid is. He swims like a 19.50 free. So he's going to win this drive regardless. But so this left-handed center allowed himself to be fronted. And that ended up being pretty critical to this play. And in fact, that's the number one thing is you're kind of playing soft. Like maybe you're not too involved in this play. Maybe you're just going to take this play off or wait until it's your turn to start fighting. But he's letting himself get fronted, and then that leads to this penalty.
Hey, Jeff, was the defense aware that your center was a lefty?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's
I'm just curious.
This was a play from the semifinal last year. So this is UOP and Pepperdine, and they play each other, 4 or 5 times a year. And this guy's a senior now, so they're very aware of who each other are, for sure.
Hey, Jeff, can we back up again to see what that center defender does from the beginning of the play?
Sure. So I'm going to take it back to just before these yellow lines are because is that okay?
Of course. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So, yeah. And we're going to take a look at another one. So like he doesn't adjust super well. And I think maybe he's also counting on this guy coming over and helping, because this guy's back. He can help here. And they're probably at this point really fine with the ball going back out over to this guy. So does all that kind of make sense?
Yeah. You know,
Yeah,
reality,
and yeah, go ahead.
you know, in reality, just obviously I've seen this play numerous times. So in reality, like the defender is he's going through what he feels is, I mean, and this is why I think why plays is it's like effective, because you don't know what a defender is going to do. So that center defender, to me, it's like, okay, I'm going to maintain my front because I'm hoping that my teammate is putting that ball under pressure. Because think about it, if the ball is under pressure, and that drive defender was able to just give him an extra half a second to catch up, the front is perfect, right? So it's almost like, going back to what Jeff was saying in the beginning, it's like you're waiting for the defense is going to make a decision, right? And when they make that decision, does your play allow you to make the reads that can exploit that decision? Because they have to. Like if he would have said, you know, in my center defender in that situation, we're not fronting. He's protecting goal side, right? But now you're allowing a live entry because where's your nearest help? Because they just drove all this drive around. So it's almost like the center defender is actually the main defender that might be attacked here. It's like if he turns around and protects the goal side, the ball could be entered, right? If he tries to front, he's hoping his teammates pressing, but again, it's just like a domino effect on defense.
Mm-hmm.
And again, just almost reiterating why plays, that's what it ultimately creates. It's a domino effect of decisions, and can your team capitalize on it to create that?
And with the new rules that are coming into play for high school and in USA water polo, there's a much larger scoring area, and and the quicker kind of penalty shot, within that scoring area is going to be helping out and even make it more worthwhile to kind of do a play, to get that opportunity. So,
and to capitalize on all that. So here's the exact same play. It's just being run on the other side. So this is just in the second half. Okay. And the pass comes from a little different spot. Sorry, there's excitement and so it's the same thing. One is going to swim across. It's just the defender's going to be kind of hip to it. It's just he's going to have to go above center. And that same guy, number 10, is going to drive. There's still the space. There's still the front. And that's the same lefty. Okay. So there he chooses to shoot. And I think, first of all, it's a shorter and thus like a higher percentage to be a good pass. The goalie, but when he catches it and turns and looks, the goalie's hands are a little bit deeper and the center is a little bit closer to him. So he makes a slightly different choice. He just decides to shoot it. And so this is when I'm talking about defining a play, I think it's important if you're designing a play for your team, maybe this guy can be kind of your hinge point or your fulcrum of like your decision. Is he going to shoot? Is he going to pass here? If he's really covered really tightly, is he going to set the ball down and draw a kick out?
Jeff, we have a question from the chat. Do you work shin off release for that pass, or was ball just placed away from the defense with no backside help since one cleared? That was, I think, on the last one where the ball was passed in the center.
So did who shin off?
It just says, kind of, do you work a shin off release for that pass, or was ball just placed away from the defense with no backside help since one cleared?
I think you can. It didn't happen in that particular one because the guy's just ridiculously fast and he's swimming at a player that's vertical. And I know we're talking about the last play, not here, but when that guy was transitioning from guarding on the perimeter to drive defense. It took him half a second, and that guy's so quick that he didn't have to shin off. But certainly if you could find their back and shin off, then do that. And if you have a player that is excellent at that, at not getting offensives, then yeah, maybe that should be a part of your play design for sure.
Here,
Yeah.
so could you define the shin off release for everybody? Yeah, can you define the shin off release, Jeff?
Oh, sorry. So basically, if you have the back of a defender, if you're driving at somebody and you are able to get basically take a stroke and put your arm over their head while still facing the goal, I think for me it's critical to not turn around and face the back of the defender, but while still facing the goal, take your whichever side you go over, you take that same side shin, put it on their hip, and push off. If you push up with your foot, it's an offensive. If you turn around and face the back of that defender, it's an offensive. At least that's how I teach it. I think refs will call things differently all the time, obviously, but
And I actually think that, you know, again, coming from the college coach perspective, is that, you know, I don't necessarily think shin offs is something you should emphasize, especially as they get older. And if you look at both these drives, it's pure like explosiveness, right, to a spot and then a change of direction. I think that's the skill. And if it's almost like a wide receiver running a route, they're not allowed to push off, right? Technically they're not allowed to push off. But if you see if they're looking like they're going one direction, the defender commits to that. Once an offensive player explodes away, breaststroke kicks away and takes a couple quick strokes, they're going to gain separation just because then the defender has to react. And I think that's the one thing that I noticed on both these drives by number 10 is how explosive he was driving straight before he changed directions. And so as a college coach, I'm like, hey, why would you bring a referee into the equation by shinning off where it could be an offensive? Anytime you say, well, this could be an offensive, I'm like, okay, then let's find a way where it's less likely to be called, right? I don't want to bring the referee into this. So when, you know, I think the one thing that focus on is like how explosive this guy is. And you don't have to go in 19.5 to be this explosive because you're talking about 3 meters of water, right?
Yeah. You're right.
Just like 4 or 5 hard strokes. How explosive can you be? And then breaking away, and then the pass has to be there. So I just wanted to throw that in there because when I start hearing shin offs and the referee, then it's like, well, let's. I think the better skill to teach in this situation is driving hard and exploding away from it, because that's what's going to ultimately give you the advantage you need, and it doesn't bring the referee in. Now you're not used to it, and so if the defender isn't there and you're trying to shin off of him, but it's not there, it doesn't, you know.
Okay, yeah, that's a good way. I think he has an advantage here because this defender's worried about 2 guys, the guy with his left arm up right now. He's worried about 2 guys, and so it's easy for him to be explosive. This is just for this particular play, and I get what you're saying. But if you've got a really good defender and they're playing really good drive defense and you want to just hold that position for a second, the ball could get hung up on the wrong side of the pool. And you might need to hold that position with a shin, even if you don't use it to necessarily push off, but you're just kind of holding that defender's back. That it could be a skill that's used. And I get not Trump wanting to bring a referee into it though, for sure. So 6-on-5s are another fun thing to use set plays for, right? And I think, so another stat that I learned, I guess, from James is that you don't necessarily score more goals if you call a timeout for your 6-on-5. And so I think quite a few coaches, myself included, we use timeouts on 6-on-5s. Yes, we've got this amazing opportunity. We're up a player. Let's use a timeout. Well, if you know that information, that you're about 50-50 either way, whether you call a timeout or not, as far as whether or not this is going to result in a goal. Remember, you're also calling a timeout for the defense to get set. And you've taken into consideration that at least for a split second, everybody's head is up, right? What do your players do when they hear 6-on-5? Or what do you teach them to do? Yell 6-on-5, right? So everybody's head's out of the water. Everybody's aware that it is a 6-on-5. So when we take a look at this play, and this is from a practice, but it's the same kind of idea. So they're calling a play when the ball is in the air before the defense really starts fighting. And again, it's practice. There would be a different intensity in the game. And this kind of first indicator here, where both 1 and 6 break the 2-meter line, can also be an indicator, like a physical indicator. We're going to do a little 3-pop here because it's the same guy. He's a lefty. Okay. So do you guys want to watch this one again? Or?
Yes, please.
So this guy is going to end up popping. He shows really good patience the first time he gets the ball. And the reason, in my opinion, the reason he's showing good patience, I'll run it half a second forward, is he's got a blocker. He's got this guy jumping at his arm, and his arm is toward the defender. And this guy might be able to jump off and get a piece of a near side shot. So he passes out of it, and then we'll see when this guy catches the ball, he slides this way, which moves this defender this way, which gives him carte blanche to attack forward and shoot. It's also important from like a basic standpoint is that lefty's never catching the ball cross face. He's always playing the ball over the top and then back. And that saves time and doesn't alert the defense that this guy's getting the ball necessarily. Okay, we're going to look at one more 6-on-5 play that is off of a timeout that involves a little bit more movement. Okay. So I would say that if you can live with basic rotations, and by basic rotations, I mean running 6 in and 3 kind of pops, 2 jumps in, and 1 kind of rotates up. Or if 1 goes in, this player jumps, this player goes in. Then if you can live with that as kind of your play, which is a lot of very successful high school coaches do, then that's totally fine. Then you might not need plays. And just again, depends on the strengths of your team and the strengths of the team that you're playing. So this play is interesting. 1 is already popping. One's gonna pass the ball and then boom, drive. And leave the 2-on-1 all the way down on that side of the pool. So it's kind of an interesting play. She pops. I think it's important to note that she touches the ball before she passes it back and then drives. So everybody looks and sees that they're in a 3-3 because they're going to instantly go back to being in a 4-2. Does everybody kind of see that? She even fakes for a little bit to make sure that everybody knows, hey, we're in a 3-3, we're in a 3-3. Nope, we're in a 4-2. And by that time, it's a little too late because this player who kind of chased to catch up here has to dive back. Oh no. Okay.
So obviously this is a little bit of 2 very high level teams. just being like the 18 under or working with the Thunder group, kind of what is your kind of pet kind of 6-on-5 play that you can kind of, if you haven't really had a whole lot of time to work on, that you go to like a 6 in 4 middle? Just just thoughts on that.
Well, so 6 in 5 wide 4 center is always good. I also like 5 center, and that's Mark at Austin College has convinced me of that wholeheartedly. So 5 center is just the other way, which is 1 in and 5 goes to the middle of the pool. And then 6 is kind of this catch and kill where 6 will have multiple options. But if you want to introduce movement on a 6-on-5, a fun way to do that is to have 1 start with the ball, okay, and kind of be active and be live. Pass it up over to 6 or to 5, just pass it to the other side of the pool, and have them bounce off this defender's back. So swim up here, get on her back, push off, and dive down here. At the same time, this player is sliding this way and sliding out. So it kind of introduces some movement, and it can kind of recreate a 2-on-1 down where this player is in trouble. Or it can actually pull out this middle defender to this player as she dives back down. If it pulls off of her, then you can kind of play the ball here. So that's kind of a fun plate that you can use that I hadn't planned on talking about, but since I just saw this, it made me think of it. That you might have to play the ball back and forth on this side a little bit, and then maybe have 6 make this kind of final pass.
So just those kind of it's very simple on one side, and then then you do the skid pass.
Yeah. So
thank you.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. Kind of a fun play. So does anybody else have any other opportunities, especially using these new rules, where we can come up with plays? So 7-on-6 late in the quarter, bringing the goalie up is obviously a new rule.
I think that one of the things that's getting overlooked a lot is corner throw with the person being live. I don't think people talk about that enough. I think everyone's like, but I don't think corner throws, because I think anytime you get a chance to get set, and I think on a corner throw, goalie tips it out of bounds, everyone gets in their positions, gets ready, you could actually run a play. It's easy to set up a play from that. And now that the player can be live, can make themselves live, now that defender that might be coming back to help might be stuck in a spot. But I think corner throws are definitely moving forward with the new rules. Is a big opportunity to run set plays.
Yeah, I'd echo what Felix said. And corner throws, especially after a goalie tip out. So you're at a corner throw, you got maybe 7 seconds on the clock. It's a great time to run a little play. And of course now the corner thrower can be live and shoot. So it puts pressure on that defense even more. Yeah,
I also can that player on the corner throw, because I haven't coached a lot of games with the new rules, or where this situation happened. If they put the ball in play, can they break the 2-meter line?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're live. They're good.
I know they're live, but I think they. I didn't know if they could just get the ball.
No, they can get inside too. Sure.
Okay. All right. So then, you can have 2 or 3 players, or 1 or 2 players going to a post, and just really mess with the goalie.
I do like the concept of the 7-on-6, especially at the end of a quarter for like a last possession, or if you need a goal, like instead of pulling the goalie, now you can pull the goalie all the way across half tank. So
and there's a couple of clips of the senior teams doing that, and it's really fun to see a goalie coming in and running like a 4-3 kind of like offensive set where there's just a double post and a typical perimeter around it. Okay. And then of course timeout plays, which is kind of it's a whole thing of just basically you can have whatever setup you want. It's the only advantage I would give to starting with after goals as opposed to just a straight up timeout play is that in after goal, you have no idea. The defense has no idea who's 1, who's 5, who's 3, who's center. They have no idea because they're all just on a line and half pool. If you're already set up in your perimeter, you know where everybody is. You're closer to the goal. I don't necessarily think it makes a huge advantage as far as applying pressure to the defense, or at least from that standpoint. Does that kind of make sense? Or is that too out of left field for some of you? So when to practice set plays, and I don't mean like what day of the week or anything. I just wanted to quantify a skill set, I guess, to where if you're working with a team that's not necessarily super experienced, what kind of skill set you would have in order to be able to comfortably at least start the discussions of running plays. So basically, if you have 2 or 3 people that can absorb pressure or make the defender foul them, right? Because it's always nice to be making this catch and kill pass on a free throw, or this kind of super decisive pass on a free throw. And then also it's nice if you have 2 or 3 players at least that can read the play and react to what the defense is doing in order to go to the right spots. But also if the defense completely falls asleep, to be able to attack and go score. Okay. You don't want somebody that's kind of a robot that's just going to run the play for the sake of running the play. So, and I guarantee you I forgot some. And so do you guys have any other skill sets that you would prefer to see before you would consider running set plays?
I mean, overall, I mean, just obviously, the awareness. And if you don't have a whole lot of kids that have the skill sets, then your set play is going to be a whole lot simpler. It's going to be 1 or 2 kids on one side of the pool as opposed to all 6 kind of moving together and such.
Yeah.
So,
okay. All right. Anybody else? Okay. So also, this was a suggestion from Joe, which I hadn't thought of, but this is great. How to practice set plays, or this is more kind of when in the practice to practice them. So I plan out my season, like my offense especially, you start with counterattacks. I don't think you can move on to 6-on-6 until you get counterattacks down. And whatever you're working on, if it's after goals or 6-on-5s, you should obviously know the basics before you try to teach a set play. Because if the defense falls asleep, you're going to go back to the basics instantly. And again, I love starting with after goals, just because it's the idea of forgetting a mistake and moving on. And then the idea of getting your team to pull themselves up and go answer that goal they just gave up.
now, I mean, what are your thoughts as far as we're talking a lot about kind of set plays on offense. What about set plays on defense?
So I've seen
kind of like the opposite. So like after a timeout, then you have this of a 5-on-6, or after a goal, after you score, this is what you're going to run every time. So.
Yeah. So I've certainly seen them, and they can be downright silly at times, where if somebody is calling a critical timeout with late in a game or something, you can just send a player to offense that's on the opposite side of the ball. I don't know if I would do that all the time, but it certainly messes up their play. And there's other ones like 5-man, when you're playing down a player, there's certainly ball handlers or tendencies on the other teams. If you've seen enough film or if you've watched them play enough, you know that there's certain players that may not shoot. There's certain players that struggle catching the ball cross face. And you can take advantage of that and go out and actually hit those players as they're trying to catch the ball and just kind of disrupt them. You just kind of disrupt the timing. If you're going to run a defensive play, I like doing it in 5-man, basically because for no other reason than when people are used to just catching the ball and faking twice and then making a pass, with nobody in their face. If you put somebody in their face, they're going to make a mistake.
Yeah, just like the one time that I like to use it a lot is, whenever you're down and the other team might call a timeout because they want to kind of because their goal is getting pressed because they're going after the ball, like a team's up by a goal, there's less than 20 seconds left, and the coach calls a timeout to save the goalie from getting the ball stolen. So I just that's when I like to pull the goalie and go press. And I was like, okay, kind of thank you, coach, for giving me the opportunity to get my defense set to give us an opportunity here. So there you go.
Yeah, it's a good point that when you call a timeout for 6-on-5, it's probably just as good for the defense that you're calling that. And maybe the only time you do that is if there's a backcourt exclusion and you want your team to have time to get up and use the full 20 seconds up in front, or if you don't like the matchups, if there's somebody that's a really good defender, maybe not a super good ball handler, and you want to swap them, then you can maybe use a timeout. But
okay, so if you don't use timeouts for 6-on-5 and such like that, when do you use timeouts? I always tell people, subbing is kind of an art form, and using timeouts is kind of an art form as well. And I'm a big believer in using all my timeouts. So I just want to see your thoughts.
Yeah. So nowadays, certainly at the end of quarters to pull your goalie up would be a good time to do that. Just because everybody's set, you get the ball back and you can call a timeout and you get everybody down to the other side of the pool, especially if there's less than 10 seconds. That's a good time to do it. Also, there are also like momentum killing timeouts, where if you went up maybe a goal and then you give up 3 goals right away, maybe a timeout to change some things there. But I'd love to hear other people's thoughts on this too.
I'll go. I'll jump in. On Thursday's talk about 6-on-5, with Jeff Chandler, right? Correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, we did talk about calling timeouts on 6-on-5, and I rarely call them unless it's a fatigue issue or I need to get athletes in the right place because we need a goal. And typically if I'm calling a timeout for a 6-on-5, if it's not for fatigue, it's for personnel. I'm not so. We have set plays that we run on 6-on-5 that the athletes call, so it's not going to be to run a certain play for me just because the other team's gonna do something different. They're also getting a chance to sub. They're also going to get a chance to set their defense. So to kind of go in there and try to joystick the situation too much, you might just that's I don't. For set plays, it's nice to have them. I don't think we need timeouts to run set plays. I think after goal corner throws, and when Jeff and I were going back and forth, and maybe it's a little bit different at here at what I'm used to doing and what I'm trying to accomplish. But I actually think that we tend to, last year we tried something new. We ran set plays when there was less than 15 seconds on the clock. To create, like I said, if our offense is going to be work for our centers, right? We're going to work for our centers. If that's falling apart because the team's running a zone or doing something and we're struggling to score goals, we have a set play they can go to, and it's based on where the ball is. If the ball's on the 1-2 side, we run this play. If the ball's on the 4-5 side, we run the other play. And I didn't give him more than that. And it was, and there was a game that we played at the end of the season where we couldn't stop a nosebleed, and we ended up winning 19-18. And I would probably say 80% of those goals, if the game took almost 2 hours, 80% of those goals was off of a set play that we ran, like either after a goal or under 15 seconds on the shot clock. And it's crazy how like the more intense the situation was, knowing that they all could go to something was a relief for them. Instead of trying to do it up on their own, they're like, oh, let's run Peter Piper, and it's like, run Peter Piper. And they're like, and everyone just ran Peter Piper, and it was easier they literally, and then they kept running it, and it was, Yeah, I think timeouts, I use them more for fatigue purposes and end of the game, because you do want to be able to manage your clock. You do want to manage your clock as much as you can, especially if you're down by a goal or up by a goal and you need the clock to stop. But other than that, like I rarely try to call timeouts in the first half unless they just score 4 goals in a row, unless I got to call a timeout to calm everybody down. And pretty much that's my opinion on timeouts and set plays.
Yeah, I'd echo that. I like to run or have the kids do a very simple set play late in the clock, and especially after an ordinary on the perimeter. Whistle blows, you got 4 seconds left. Okay, make this pick, make this cut, 1 pass and shoot, because you're going to run out of clock anyway. And it actually, to Felix's point, it clears their head. It's like, oh, there's 4 seconds on the clock. I know what to do, right? Makes it easy, especially for the younger kids.
And also for the younger kids, as far as timeouts are concerned, again, I'm a big believer in trying to use all my timeouts, and I just use them for teaching purposes. If we're in the fourth quarter and we're losing by 5 or 10 goals, let's call a timeout and get those kids in. And it's an opportunity, to learn. The same thing if you're winning by 4 or 5 goals. I wouldn't necessarily do it if we are winning by 10 to 15 goals or something, but it's one of those things where I'm a big believer to use those timeouts, even if it's just to upset the referees a little bit too. So because they have to referee a little bit longer.
Well, I think you need to be on that call on Thursday where they're talking about relationship with officials.
I will be on the call. Kind of text me the info.
All right, I will.
So,
well, are there any more questions for Jeff? Jeff, I do appreciate it. Thank you so much. This is this. There's a question?
No, I was hi to Miguel. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I actually had one for Jeff, and I guess it could go for Jeff and or Felix. But do you guys find that at the collegiate level, you can call something and diagram something literally right there on the spot? Or, because I know Felix, I know you were on that call we did a while ago on this subject, and Jeff, you and I worked together for, the athletes we're dealing with here. It's got to be scripted, it's got to be practiced, et cetera, before we even design anything. But, where you guys are you guys in a position where, and even at UOP, could you just sit there and get down on the level, draw something on the whiteboard, and they would just execute it, or was that never done?
To my knowledge, and I was usually in the stands filming, but to my knowledge, that was hardly ever done. They had a playbook going into each game, and out there, so Felix has 4 games that he has to plan for every weekend, or 5 sometimes. And out there, I think they would a lot of times have 1 game when it got into their conference season. So they could really attack and get really creative with plays, but they would all have those ahead of time. I don't think they would ever draw something up last minute unless it was like, oh, hey, remember this one from 2 weeks ago? Let's do that.
Yeah, and I would say,
you and Mark? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and I would say, like Miguel, just repeating what I said on that call a couple weeks ago is like, and I actually on one of the first times I met Dayan, the national team coach, and we were talking about, he was laughing at coaches that use clipboards. If they don't know it by then, they don't know it. That was just like, it's right. And I thought about it, and I like I said, if you're relying on a clipboard and your athletes, especially 14 and 16 unders, to see something and be able to read it at that time, you should have, if you're not practicing enough where you don't need the board, I don't know how successful you're going to be. I don't like, it's like you can go back to one of the games we played last year. And the only reason I remember this, because it stood out, because it was on ESPN Plus. We played Princeton in a tie game, and I called the timeout, and the camera zoomed in on me, and I'm like making jokes as we're talking about what play to run. I'm like, all right, I'm going to go to my bread and butter, and everyone's laughing because it's like the only play I call. And there was no, I was, instead of focusing on trying to get everyone's attention who's looking up at the stands looking for their their significant other, or if mommy and daddy are filming, you know, just say, hey, we're going to run play 2, and everyone feel good. You know, and like you remember, you know, and I think that's, you should be practicing these plays enough at practice where you don't need the board. I mean, I do use the board for defensive purposes. Hey, this team keeps doing this, we need to do this. But other than that, as far as our offense, it's we practice it. If we're not practicing, we're not doing it in the game, especially a game that matters.
Or for people on the bench, if like I'm basically a career assistant coach, so I'm on the bench, like showing people with the whiteboard, you know, that like, hey, when this is why this happened last time, and you can say, hey, maybe drive on this side as opposed to this side, like that. That's why I would keep a whiteboard. But yeah, it's super hard to get them to do something new. I've tried it several times, and it just usually seems to fail. When it works, you buy yourself another 2 weeks of having it not work. You know what I mean?
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Any more questions, guys? This has been some great discussion. Thank you. I know we just had a kind of a handful of people on here, but I think almost everyone was kind of got a comment in and such. Jeff, thank you so much for coming on. This is like a subject that isn't really discussed as much as it needs to be. So, and I do appreciate it. Guys, we are going to have another Coach to Coaches on Thursday at 12:30 Central. So I do appreciate it. Just kind of, it's going to be the same. It's going to be the same password and the same Zoom link. Until then, guys, everyone take care.
Thank you.